22 years of illusion, one shattering revelation. I believed I knew everything. 22 years of marriage, seemingly indestructible, forged in love and unwavering trust. An idyllic existence, a flourishing business, a welcoming home nestled in the suburbs of Portland, a wife I adored, and a daughter who was the very essence of my pride. The American dream, wouldn't you agree? That's how it appeared from the outside, until the abyss opened up. I first met Irene during our final year at the University of Oregon. She was studying journalism, a brilliant mind, a laugh that could illuminate any room. I can still vividly recall the first time I saw her in a campus coffee shop, fiercely typing away on her laptop, utterly oblivious to the world around her. It took 3 visits and 1 accidentally spilled coffee to finally capture her attention. When her gaze met mine, initially annoyed, then softening into a smile, I knew I was utterly lost. We were young, perhaps too young, yet so irrevocably certain of each other. Just 8 months after our first date, amidst the vibrant chaos of a summer festival by the waterfront, I proposed. The ring had cost me 3 months of meager savings from my part-time job, but the expression on her face was worth every single penny. "Are you sure?" she whispered, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. "We have an entire lifetime ahead of us." "Exactly why I am sure," I replied. "I want to spend every single moment of that lifetime with you." The echo of betrayal. When my world crumbled. A year later, Cassandra arrived. We hadn't planned for children so soon, but when Irene told me she was pregnant, it simply felt right. I can still see the first time I held my daughter, a tiny, perfect creature with Irene's eyes and my stubborn chin. In that sacred moment, I made a silent vow to give her the entire world. The early years were a beautiful, exhilarating chaos. I was just launching my landscaping business, toiling 14 hours a day, while Irene finished her degree and cared for Cassandra. We lived in a cramped apartment where the thin walls offered no escape from our neighbors' constant arguments. We were almost always broke, surviving on instant noodles and meticulously counting every penny until payday. But, oh God, we were happy. There's something profound about fighting together that binds souls. Every minuscule victory was celebrated with wild abandon. A new client, Irene's first published article, Cassandra's first tentative steps across our tiny living room. "We're building something real here," Irene would murmur, pressed against me on our worn second-hand sofa after Cassandra had finally drifted off to sleep. "Something that will last forever." I believed her with every fiber of my being. We were that couple who made it work, the ones who would grow old together on a porch, surrounded by grandchildren and cherished memories. By the time Cassandra reached 16, Elliott Landscaping held contracts across the entire city. Irene had ascended to section editor at the Portland Tribune. We had bought a beautiful home, enjoyed family vacations, established a college fund. We had achieved it all, or so I believed. A sixth sense and a chilling premonition. After 22 years of marriage, you develop an almost supernatural sixth sense for your partner. For instance, I could tell Irene was upset by the way she loaded the dishwasher, every movement precise and meticulous, a stark contrast to her usual carefree approach. That's why I noticed when she started staying late at the office 3 nights a week. "Big story," she'd say, tossing her bag by the door long after dinner had grown cold. Her excuse sounded plausible. She'd been assigned to investigate corruption within the city council. But something felt terribly wrong. I had built my landscaping company by trusting my instincts. When a slope looked unstable, I reinforced it, even if the client grumbled about the additional cost. Those same instincts were now screaming at me. One night, having just completed a monumental project for the city's new waterfront park, a contract that had consumed 6 grueling months of my team's lives, I decided to surprise Irene at her office. I picked up takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant and headed downtown. The Tribune building was nearly deserted at 9 o'clock in the evening. The security guard, who recognized me from various corporate parties, waved me through with a friendly nod. "The 7th floor is pretty empty, Mr. Elliott. Not sure your wife is still there." I found the features department silent and dark, save for a single desk lamp in a corner cubicle. Through the glass door, I saw Irene talking on the phone, laughing in a way she hadn't laughed at home in months. My hands clenched around the takeout bag. I could have burst in, demanded answers. Instead, I retreated into the shadows and watched. She was different, somehow vibrant, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. When she hung up, she stared at her phone for a long moment, a faint smile gracing her lips. Then she typed something quickly and put it away. I slipped away before she could possibly spot me, discarding the untouched food in an outdoor trash receptacle. That night, I lay beside her in bed, listening to her quiet breathing and wondering who was on the other end of that phone call. The bitter truth and a stab in the back. The next morning, I did something I never imagined I would do. While Irene was in the shower, I checked her phone. Nothing suspicious in recent calls or messages. Either I was paranoid or she was meticulously careful. 2 days later, I got my answer. Cassandra had taken my truck to move some furniture into her college apartment. When she returned, she handed me the keys along with a credit card receipt she'd found in the console. "Dad, why were you at the Riverview Hotel last Friday? I thought you were at that landscaping expo in Seattle." I hadn't been at either of those places, but I knew precisely who had been using my corporate credit card. I am not a man who makes decisions without irrefutable proof. After 2 decades of building a business, I had learned to investigate thoroughly before taking action. So I hired Mike, an old friend who owed me a favor after I'd landscaped his entire property at cost. "Are you sure, Neil?" Mike asked as we sat in his truck outside the Tribune building. "Once you know, you can't unsee it." "I need the truth," I replied, my jaw clenched. The credit card receipt showed a hotel charge from a time I was supposedly out of town. Either someone had stolen my card, or Irene was meeting someone and covering her tracks. After a week of surveillance, Mike called me during a client meeting. "You need to see this," he said. "He's back at the Riverview." I excused myself, telling my foreman to finish the presentation. 20 minutes later, I was pulling into the hotel parking lot. Mike pointed to a silver Audi parked in the corner. "That's not her car," I frowned. "No, but she arrived in a cab 40 minutes ago. The Audi belongs to this guy." He handed me his long-lens camera. Through it, I saw a tall, gray-haired man checking his watch before entering the hotel. Something about him felt vaguely familiar. "His name is Damon Reeves," Mike said, "editor at the Seattle Sentinel. Apparently, he and Irene worked together years ago." The name hit me like a physical blow. Damon, the guy she'd dated before me, whose name she'd occasionally mentioned with a distant look in her eyes. The one who'd moved to Seattle for his career just before we met. "I've seen enough," I said, handing back the camera. Cold composure and a devastating confession. That night, I didn't confront Irene. Instead, I scheduled a session with our longtime family therapist, Dr. Winters. I told Irene it was about my stress from expanding the business. She readily agreed, probably relieved I wasn't questioning her late-night conference story. During our session, Dr. Winters asked about our relationship. "Honestly," I said, looking directly at Irene, "I feel like something has shifted between us." She squirmed uncomfortably. "We've both been busy. It's just a phase." "Is there something else going on, Irene?" Dr. Winters asked gently. "Something Neil should know?" Irene glanced at her phone, which vibrated with a message. Something in her expression broke. "I've been in touch with someone," she confessed, not meeting my gaze. "An old friend, Damon Reeves." "Damon Reeves isn't just an old friend," I said calmly. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "How did you— Does it matter? What matters is that you've been lying to me, using my credit card to pay for your hotels." "Doctor," Winters attempted to mediate, but Irene suddenly stood up. "I'm sorry you found out this way, but perhaps it's for the best," she said, her voice now stronger. "Damon and I have reconnected, and I've realized something. I've been denying it for years. He was always the one for me, Neil. What we had, it was good, but it was wrong." I sat there, 22 years of marriage dissolving before my very eyes as my wife told me I had been her consolation prize all this time. The drive home from Dr. Winter's office was silent, heavy with 2 decades of memories that suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. Every anniversary, every vacation, every quiet Sunday morning, All of it felt like sand slipping through my fingers. At home, Irene immediately began packing a suitcase. "Is that it?" I asked, standing in the doorway of our bedroom. 22 years and you just walk away?" She froze, a folded sweater clutched in her hands. "I didn't plan for this to happen. Damon contacted me about a potential job opening at the Sentinel. It was supposed to be purely professional, but it ended up being much more personal." "I'm done," I said, the control in my voice surprising even me. Inside, I was a hurricane, but on the outside, I remained the same stoic, practical man I'd always been. "I think I loved him all this time," she whispered, almost to herself. "When he left for Seattle, I tried to move on. With you. I built a good life, a comfortable life, but seeing him again—" "Stop," I cut her off. "I'm not interested in being your silver medal." I left the room and found myself in Cassandra's old bedroom, now a guest room, but still filled with her debate trophies and childhood photos. My daughter. Would she understand? A daughter's betrayal. As if summoned by my thoughts, the front door opened. "Mom? Dad?" Cassandra called out. "Why are both your cars here in the middle of the day?" Irene emerged from our bedroom, eyes red but chin held high. "Cass, darling, we need to talk." I watched my daughter's face as Irene explained her reunion with Damon, how she believed they were destined to be together all these years. With every word, Cassandra's expression shifted from confusion to comprehension, but not to the reaction I expected. "So you'll finally be happy, Mom?" she asked, taking Irene's hands. "I think so, darling," Irene replied, and tears streamed down her face. Cassandra turned to me, her eyes, so much like her mother's, filled with a strange mix of pity and accusation. "Dad, you were always so focused on the business, on providing. Maybe you didn't see Mom was unhappy." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own daughter, for whom I would move mountains, was siding against me without even hearing my side. "You don't know everything, Cass," I said, my voice low. "I know Mom deserves happiness," she said firmly. "If she found it with Damon after all these years, isn't that what matters?" In that moment, looking at my wife and daughter united against me, something hardened in my chest. The foundation I had spent a lifetime building didn't just crack, it completely crumbled. "You cheated on me," I finally said, my voice cutting through the room like steel. "After 22 years of marriage, you betrayed everything we built, and now our daughter applauds you for it." I grabbed my keys and wallet. "You two have clearly figured this all out. I'm done." Vengeance. Not in bitterness, but in rebirth. I spent 3 nights at the Timber Lodge Motel on the outskirts of Portland, surrounded by truckers and traveling salesmen. The outdated wood paneling and humming vending machines perfectly mirrored my mood. Worn, functional, without pretense. On the 4th morning, I returned home while Irene was at work. I needed documents, clothes, and time to think without emotional confrontations. What I found in the safe changed everything. While gathering financial records from the home office, I discovered a sealed envelope marked Damon Personal. Inside was a stack of letters, some dating back 15 years, all from Damon Reeves to my wife. They had never fully lost touch. Each letter had been meticulously preserved, some with faint tear stains, others with handwritten notes in the margins. The most recent, dated 6 months ago, mentioned the finalization of his divorce and contained the line, "Perhaps fate is giving us another chance." My hands didn't tremble. My breath remained even. 2 decades of resolving business crises had taught me to compartmentalize emotion. But inside, something fundamentally shifted. The last shred of doubt about whether this was a recent development or a long-standing deception vanished. As I finished packing, Cassandra unexpectedly appeared. She froze in the doorway of my home office. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Taking what I need," I replied, closing my briefcase. "Mom's worried about you," she said, blocking my path. "You can't just disappear." "Worried?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Your mother has been in love with another man for the entirety of our marriage, Cass. These—" I held up the envelope. "Prove it." She took the letters, her confidence faltering as she skimmed the dates and contents. "But," she said, "they only recently reconnected." Life lesson, kiddo. People lie. Even parents. Her eyes filled with tears. But you and Mom were happy. I remember. We were, I conceded, my voice softening slightly. Or at least, I was. That's what makes this worse. What are you going to do? The only thing I can do, move forward. But this is your home, she protested. You built this place. You can't just give up everything. I looked at my daughter, so intelligent yet so naive. This stopped being my home the moment your mother decided I was second best, and I'm not giving up. I'm choosing my own path forward. I showed her the stack of legal documents I'd gathered. Tomorrow I'm filing for divorce. I've already spoken to my attorney. Your mother can keep the house. I'll start over. But what about me? Cassandra suddenly asked, looking terribly young. You made your choice pretty clear, Cass. You think your mom deserves happiness with her true love. I won't stand in the way of that fantasy. I kissed her forehead and walked around her, carrying my briefcase and duffel bag. Behind me, I heard her quiet sobs as she continued to read the letters, the proof of a betrayal that spanned not months but decades. As I drove away from the home I had built, landscaped, and filled with dreams, I didn't look back. Men like me don't break. We rebuild. The cleavage and new horizons. The county courthouse was quiet that Tuesday morning. My attorney, Sandra Matthews, met me on the granite steps, briefcase in hand, determination in her stride. Are you absolutely certain about this, Neil? She asked, her voice low. Full dissolution, minimal negotiation, no fault? Absolutely, I replied. I built my business knowing when to cut losses and move on. The same principle applies here. Inside, we filed the necessary paperwork to initiate the divorce. No drama, no scenes, just the methodical dismantling of 22 years reduced to forms and signatures. As we exited, fate had other plans. Irene was ascending the steps, accompanied by her own attorney. She stopped abruptly when she saw me, the color draining from her face. Neil? My name sounded foreign on her lips now. I was about to file, I stated. Already done, I replied calmly. Her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit, exchanged glances with Sandra. Perhaps we should discuss settlement terms now that both parties are present. We retreated to a small conference room. The four of us sat around a polished table that reflected our distorted images. My client is prepared to be quite generous, Irene's lawyer began. She understands the disruption this has caused, and I don't want anything, I interrupted. She can keep the house, her retirement accounts, everything in her name. I'll take my business, my personal accounts, and the belongings I've already removed from the house. Irene stared at me. You can't be serious. After 22 years, you chose someone else, I finished. I'm simply respecting your choice by fully disengaging. Her attorney tried to argue that I was entitled to more, but Sandra had my instructions. We laid out my terms, a clean break, no alimony in either direction, and minimal ongoing contact. As the lawyers hashed out the details, Irene leaned across the table toward me. What about Cassandra? She's devastated. Devastated? I raised an eyebrow. As I recall, she was celebrating your newfound happiness with your soulmate. That's not fair. She's stuck in the middle. No, she chose a side, just like you did. The door suddenly burst open and Cassandra herself rushed in, eyes red from crying. Dad! Mom, stop this! How did you know we were here? Irene asked. Chelsea called me. She's in my English lit class and her dad is going through something similar. We were talking. I exchanged a glance with Sandra, who nodded slightly. Leave us, I told the lawyers. Once they exited, I turned to my daughter. This doesn't concern you, Cass. The divorce is between your mother and me. Doesn't concern me, she repeated, incredulous. You're my parents, and you're throwing everything away, Dad. The house, half of everything you worked for. I'm not giving up anything that truly matters, I said firmly. I built my business from the ground up once. I can do it again. What I won't do is fight for material possessions with a woman who was emotionally unfaithful for the entirety of our marriage. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. Today in court, I'm surrendering my legal rights as a husband, but make no mistake, I'm gaining something far more valuable, my self-respect. A new chapter, a renewed strength. 6 months after the divorce, Elliott Landscaping had expanded into 3 neighboring counties. I immersed myself in the work, securing contracts for 2 major municipal parks and an upscale residential development. My team had doubled in size, and I had moved into a modest yet comfortable apartment overlooking the Willamette River. I had chosen a clean slate over a bitter battle, and it was paying dividends. No looking back, no dwelling on the betrayal, just forward momentum and hard work. This strategy served me well until Thanksgiving, when an unexpected visitor appeared in my office. "Your secretary said I could wait," Cassandra said, rising from the leather sofa in my study. She looked thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. "You've been avoiding my calls." "Been busy," I replied, sitting down. "My blueprints. The Monroe project starts next week." "Dad," she moved closer. "Mom sold the house." I raised an eyebrow. "That was part of the agreement? It's her property now." "She and Damon are moving to Seattle. They used the money to buy an apartment near his office." Her voice was strained with something I couldn't quite place, perhaps anger or disillusionment. "She didn't even consult me." "You're 20, Cass. You're an adult. She doesn't need your permission." "It's our home," she cried. "Every single memory I have is in that house. My growth marks on the kitchen wall, the treehouse you built for me, the garden we planted together. All gone, to strangers now." I sighed, leaning back against my desk. "They're just places, kiddo. The memories stay with you." "Easy for you to say. You just walked away from everything without looking back." My calm facade cracked slightly. "You think that? That this was easy?" I opened a desk drawer and pulled out a small wooden box, the only personal item in my office. This is all I kept. Inside were a few items: Cassandra's first baby tooth, her childhood drawing of our family, a Father's Day card she'd made when she was 10, and a small jar of dirt from the backyard where we'd given her hamster a full funeral when she was 8. "I didn't walk away from what mattered," I said quietly. "I just refused to fight for the rest." Her eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong, Dad, about everything. I found Mom's old journals after you left. She'd been writing to Damon for years, even when they weren't in direct contact. She called you her safe choice, her comfortable compromise." She angrily wiped her eyes. "How could she write that after everything you did for us?" I gently closed the box. "People see what they want to see, Cass. Your mother needed to believe she sacrificed her true love for duty. It made her the tragic hero of her own story." "And I completely bought into it," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Dad." "You're here now," I simply said. "That's what matters. Can we start over somehow?" I looked at my daughter, the only person around whom I had truly built my life, and felt something rigid inside me begin to soften. "How about dinner?" I offered. "There's a decent steakhouse nearby." It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a foundation. And if there was one thing I knew, it was how to build on solid ground, triumph, and new hope. A year after the divorce, I received an unexpected email from Mike, my former friend who'd helped expose Irene's affair. "Thought you should see this," his message read, with a link to the Seattle Sentinel website. The article was a profile of Damon Reeves, newly promoted to executive editor, with a beaming Irene, now Irene Reeves, on his arm at some charity event. The article mentioned their whirlwind romance and marriage, as if their story hadn't stretched back decades. I closed the browser without finishing the piece. Their fiction no longer concerned me. That evening, I met with Ryan Johnston, a commercial developer I'd been courting as a client, at an upscale downtown restaurant. His planned eco-friendly shopping center could be my biggest contract yet. "Impressive proposal," Ryan said, pushing the portfolio across the table. "But I'm still talking to Westlake Designs. They came in 15% under you." "Westlake uses non-native plants that look good initially but don't thrive in the Oregon climate," I explained. "Their irrigation systems are inefficient. In 3 years, you'll spend twice as much on maintenance for what they install." Ryan looked at me with renewed interest. Most guys would just cut their margins to get the contract. I don't compete on price, I replied, signaling the waiter for another bourbon. I compete on value and integrity. My work endures. Straightforward, Ryan chuckled. I like that. Let me think on it. As he stepped away to take a call, the restaurant hostess approached the table with a familiar figure. Dad, Cassandra exclaimed. I thought that was you. She was with a young man who seemed vaguely familiar. Dad, do you remember Jason Miller from my environmental policy seminar? The neatly dressed young man extended his hand. Mr. Elliott, good to see you again, sir. After awkward introductions, I invited them to join me. When Ryan returned, Cassandra smoothly engaged him in conversation about sustainable building practices, a topic she'd absorbed over years of dinner table discussions about my business. By dessert, Ryan was impressed enough to shake my hand firmly. Elliott Landscaping gets the contract. Your daughter here closed the deal. Anyone who raised such a knowledgeable young woman clearly does quality work. After he left, Cassandra beamed. I just helped you land a major client? You did, I admitted, a surge of pride swelling within me. You always had your old man's business acumen. Speaking of business, she hesitated, exchanging glances with Jason. I've been thinking about my future plans. Graduate school, I suppose? Actually, Cassandra offered a shy smile, I wanted to ask if Elliott Landscaping had ever considered expanding into environmental consulting. With climate change concerns, businesses need guidance on sustainable landscaping practices. It could be an entirely new division. I studied my daughter, confident, intelligent, displaying the same entrepreneurial spark I'd had at her age. An interesting proposition, I said carefully. It would require someone dedicated to building that division from the ground up. I have ideas, she replied, her eyes gleaming with hope. If you're willing to hear them. For the first time in over a year, I felt something long dormant awaken. Not just pride in my daughter, but excitement for the future. Not a return to what was lost, but something new, something sprouting. I'm listening, I said, truly meaning the words for the first time since the divorce. Rebirth 5 years on. 2 years after the divorce, Elliott Environmental Consulting was thriving under Cassandra's leadership. What began as a tentative dinner proposal had blossomed into a lucrative division of my company, with 3 full-time employees and contracts with Oregon's largest developers. On a crisp autumn morning, I stood with Cassandra at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Monroe Eco Center, the sustainable shopping complex that had marked the beginning of our professional partnership. Mr. Elliott! Ryan Johnston approached us, champagne flute in hand. Your team exceeded all expectations. The city council is already discussing using your firm for the waterfront redevelopment. That would be my daughter's department, I replied, nodding toward Cassandra. She designed the rainwater harvesting system everyone is raving about. As Ryan engaged Cassandra in a discussion with investors, I stepped aside to survey the scene. The terraced gardens, native plantings, and stone pathways all bore the signature quality of my company. But the innovative water features and solar integration were pure Cassandra. You must be very proud, a woman's voice said beside me. This is beautiful work. I turned to find an attractive woman in her 40s surveying the landscape with an appreciative gaze. Something about her seemed familiar. Linda Mercer, she introduced herself. I'm the new director of city planning. We met briefly at a proposals meeting last month. Neil Elliott, I shook her hand. And yes, I am proud, though I can't take all the credit for this project. My daughter's got the chops. The very daughter I've heard so much about, she asked, smiling. The environmental wizard? That's her, I confirmed. Best decision I ever made was bringing her into the business. Linda's gaze was direct, intelligent. Second chances are rare in families. Not everyone gets them. Before I could reply, my phone vibrated. A message from Mike. Saw this in the paper today. Thought you should know. Attached was a news article about layoffs at the Seattle Sentinel. Among those let go was executive editor Damon Reeves, described as recently divorced. I closed the message without comment. Bad news? Linda asked, noticing my expression. Ancient history, I replied, tucking my phone away. Nothing that matters now. We walked through the terraced gardens together, discussing native plant species and water conservation. When she mentioned she had recently moved from California after her own divorce, I found myself offering to buy her a coffee sometime to welcome her to Portland. 5 years ago, I thought my life was ending. 2 years ago, I thought I'd never trust anyone again. But standing in this place, built on new beginnings, I realized something I had almost forgotten. The future remains unwritten, even after the most painful chapters. As Linda smiled and accepted my invitation, I felt something long dormant come back to life. Not the desperate passion of youth, but something more enduring, something built on a solid foundation. Epilogue. My own unshakable foundation. Exactly 5 years after my divorce was finalized, I stood in the backyard of my new home in the West Hills, surrounded by friends, employees, and family. String lights twinkled in the trees I had meticulously chosen and planted myself, illuminating the terraced garden that had become my personal sanctuary. "Speech!" Ryan Johnston called out, raising his glass. In the year since the Monroe Project, he had become both a major client and a close friend. I wasn't one for public speaking, but some occasions were worth it. Linda squeezed my hand encouragingly as I cleared my throat. 5 years ago, I thought my life was ending. I began, surveying the faces gathered on the patio. Instead, it was just beginning. A new phase. Like any good landscape design, sometimes you have to clear the ground before you can build something better. A ripple of laughter went through the group. My team from Elliott Landscaping and Environmental Consulting raised their glasses in agreement. In the past 5 years, our company has tripled in size. My daughter has revolutionized our approach to environmental design. I gestured toward Cassandra, who stood with her fiancé Jason by the fire pit I'd built last autumn, and I've learned that second chances come in unexpected forms. I turned to Linda, whose engagement ring caught the firelight. After 2 years of dating and 1 year of living together, we had decided to make it official last month. No grand gestures or dramatic proposals, just two people who had weathered their own storms, choosing to build something together. Later, as guests began to depart, Cassandra found me by the stone wall that marked the property's edge. "She'd be proud of you, you know," she said quietly. "Your mother?" I asked, surprised. "No," Cassandra shook her head. "My grandmother, your mom. She always said you were a builder of hearts, not just with your hands, but with your whole life." The mention of my mother, gone for 10 years, brought a lump to my throat. She was a wise woman. "I got a letter from Mom last week," Cassandra continued. "She's back in Portland teaching journalism at a community college. Damon isn't in her life at all." "Are you going to see her?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Eventually," she sighed, "but I'm not rushing it. Some foundations need time to rebuild." I nodded, understanding completely. Whatever happens with your mom, you know where home is now. As we walked back toward the house where Linda was saying goodbye to the last few guests, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not because everything was perfect, life never is, but because I had rebuilt everything on my own terms, with my own hands. The man I had become in these 5 years was stronger than the one Irene had left behind, not in spite of the betrayal, but because of how I chose to react to it. The best revenge isn't bitterness or retribution. It's creating a life so full that the past becomes simply the past. "Ready to go in?" Linda asked, slipping her hand into mine. "Absolutely," I replied, pouring every possible meaning into the word.